Today I'm going to tell you a story so intense and heartbreaking, it will leave you in shock. Set in the sun-scorched plains of the American frontier, where the wind carries secrets, every shadow hides a threat. This is where a peaceful homestead becomes a battlefield, and where old ghosts refuse to stay buried. It all started with a simple knock at the edge of a farm. A tiny moment that would change the fate of everyone who lived there. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. In the unforgiving stretches of the Nebraska Territory, 1874, a weathered farmer moved steadily across his land as the wind stirred dust devils beneath a cloudless sky. His hands bore the thickened skin of a man who'd worked every inch of soil with honest grit. But the faded scars beneath his shirt told stories best left buried. From a distant ridgeline, a band of outlaws watched, unaware that trying to steal from Roan Vexley would be the last mistake they'd ever get to make. The late summer sun hung low and heavy over Roan's wheat fields, turning them into a shimmering sea of gold that shifted with each gust of prairie wind. At 53, his face was leathery and lined by years under the sun, but his movements were still sharp, deliberate, as he repaired the irrigation trench that kept his land thriving while others withered in the drought. 10 years working this land had taught him patience, but anyone watching closely would notice how his eyes never stopped scanning the horizon, a habit born not of farming, but of surviving battlefields. Behind him stood a barn that looked simple to outsiders, but to the trained eye, it was a fortress. Every board hand-picked, each nail driven with care. Sight lines were perfectly measured. The walls were thick enough to stop more than wind, and beneath the floorboards, a root cellar ran deep, far too deep for storing just carrots. Roan paused, sensing a shift, the kind a man learns to trust. The birds had gone silent. From the farmhouse, Kaela Vexley stepped out, brown hair pulled back, carrying a pitcher of water. At 22, she had the poise of her late mother, Isolde Marin. But Roan had taught her more than grace. He'd taught her how to survive. Without turning, he called out low, "Take it back inside, Kaela." She hesitated, then turned on her heel without question, reading the change in her father's tone like thunder before a storm. Roan resumed his work with practiced ease, but his senses tracked the plume of dust rising fast in the east. He knew the signs. Multiple riders, fast-moving, arrogant. The kind of men who thought the frontier was theirs for the taking. His land, his well-irrigated, thriving land, stood out like a ripe peach in a desert. While others' crops failed, Roan's flourished, thanks to irrigation methods he'd learned from local tribes. He shared freely with neighbors, earning both respect and quiet resentment. But what set him apart wasn't just the bounty of his fields. It was something deeper, something in the way he moved, in the quiet edge he carried, like a Bowie knife wrapped in worn flannel. Inside the house, Kaela peered through the shutters as the riders broke through the heat shimmer. 6 of them, rough and trail-worn. Their weapons, by contrast, gleamed like they'd been polished that morning. Their leader sat high in the saddle, posture sharp, like someone who used to wear rank. His silver-handled Remington caught the sunlight, a clear message. Roan kept working, his body loose, mind already running through distances, angles, options. That cellar under the barn. It held more than root vegetables. Only he and Kaela knew just how much more. 10 years of quiet had taught him the value of readiness. The 20 before that had taught him what it cost to hesitate. The riders came in a loose spread, military-like but casual. Their leader, his face battered from bar brawls, pulled up 20 yards from Roan. "Well now," the man called out, with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "That's a fine field of wheat you got there, old-timer." especially considering how dry it's been. Roan straightened slowly, leaning on his shovel like a tired farmer. "The good Lord provides," he replied, even as his balance shifted subtly forward. He knew the type. Men with enough discipline to be dangerous and just enough ego to be reckless. "Name's Rook Naller," the leader said, tipping his hat with a mock flourish. "My boys and I represent certain business interests. Been noticing how some farms are doing mighty fine, even while others ain't. Kinda feels like someone's holding out." A younger outlaw with a scruffy beard spat into the irrigation ditch. "Way we see it," he added. "Folks who got plenty ought to share with those who don't." His hand hovered over his revolver, finger twitching. Roan glanced at the tainted water, expression unchanged. "Might want to watch where you spit, son. Man's sweat deserves more respect than that." The words were calm, but the tone made two of the riders shift in their saddles. Naller dismounted, his spurs cutting the quiet like warning bells. Through the farmhouse window, Kaela had her father's rifle leveled, trained steady on the gang. She'd only seen Roan let loose once, 5 years back, when a group of rustlers had tried to take their cattle. She still dreamed about the aftermath. "Let's keep this civil," Naller said, walking slow as his men began to fan out. "You got 2 choices. Contribute regular to our community fund, or we start rethinking property lines. One way's clean, other way gets dirty." Roan didn't flinch, but in his mind, every detail clicked into place. The way one rider's horse limped slightly, the twitchy weight shift of the man with an eye patch. All things you'd miss, unless you'd survived things most men wouldn't. "I've been working this land 10 years, Roan said evenly. "Shared water rights with every neighbor who asked, never turned anyone away." His voice hardened. "But that ain't what this is it?" Naller's mask cracked, revealing the threat beneath. "Times are changing, old man. You either change with them or get plowed under." He gave a nod. One of his men dismounted, pulling a torch from his saddle and stepping toward the fields. Roan hadn't moved, but somehow, in that moment, he seemed larger, like the land itself had pulled taut around him. "That crop ain't yours to burn," he said quietly. But the words cut like a blade through silence. The outlaw hesitated mid-step, and Kaela's grip tightened on the trigger. The silence around Roan Vexley felt heavier than any movement ever could. "That crop isn't yours to torch," he said quietly. Yet the words cut through the air like a sharpened blade. The man holding the firebrand froze mid-step. Inside the house, Kaela Vexley tightened her grip on the rifle as the tension thickened. She had seen her father face danger before, but this time felt different. These weren't common raiders. The way they spread out, the way they measured distance, spoke of men who had once worn uniforms and lost their way. Through the narrow opening in the shutters, Kaela could see Roan's hands resting loose at his sides, far from the work belt she knew hid more than farming tools. Rook Naller drew his silver-handled revolver with smooth, deliberate precision, though he kept it angled toward the dirt. "Maybe we ought to show you just how serious we are about this deal," he said, letting his gaze drift toward the farmhouse. "That's a mighty fine daughter you got there. Would be a real shame if her future got complicated." What happened next defied reason. Roan moved like lightning given human form. His coat swept back and a custom-built Colt appeared in his hand as if it had always been there. Before Naller could even blink, his prized revolver was blasted from his grip, spinning uselessly into the dust as Roan's shot struck the hammer with perfect precision. The Naller 6 stood frozen, stunned by what they had just witnessed. "That was your warning," Roan said, his voice carrying across the suddenly hushed field. I've got 5 rounds left and 6 of you. Do the math." His tone never changed, but something behind it made even Naller's battle-scarred men swallow hard. One of the younger riders twitched toward his gun, but Roan's eyes snapped to him. "Son, I've buried men twice your caliber before breakfast, back when I was younger than you." Naller's face drained of color as recognition finally struck. "They said you died in the war." "They said plenty." Roan cut in coldly. Most of it was lies. The prairie wind carried the smell of burned powder and fear through the wheat as a decade of carefully guarded peace teetered on the edge. Slowly, Nallor lifted his hands, rage fighting with survival in his scarred eyes. Behind him, his men stood motionless, their swagger shattered. The man with the torch went pale, the flame trembling in his grip. "I never thought I'd see you again," Nallor muttered. "Not after Richmond." "Drop it," Roan said sharply, never breaking eye contact. "Put the fire out." The man obeyed instantly, grinding the flame into the dirt. From the farmhouse, Kaela watched as her father held them all in place, his focus razor-tight, his vision catching every twitch, every shift of weight. She saw it too. Some of the older riders weren't just afraid. They recognized him. They knew exactly who stood before them. The younger ones only stared, their illusions collapsing. "Our reputation," Nallor began. "Doesn't matter," Roan interrupted calmly. "What matters is your choice." He stepped forward just enough to make the horses nervously stamp. "You ride out of here and spread the word that Roan Vexley's land is off limits, or you stay and find out if I'm still as fast as the stories claim." A long moment passed as Nallor weighed his odds. His eyes flicked to the revolver lying in the dust. Roan's unwavering stare made the answer clear. "Mount up!" Nallor finally barked. His men didn't hesitate. As they turned their horses, he threw one last bitter line over his shoulder. "This land's changing. One man can't stand against what's coming." Roan gave a thin smile that never reached his eyes. "Good thing I'm not alone." The setting sun flashed off Kaela's rifle barrel, revealing she had held them in her sights the entire time. "Enjoying the story?" A voice cut in briefly. "Subscribe if you are." Now back to it. The riders disappeared in a cloud of dust and wounded pride. Roan stayed ready until they vanished beyond the horizon. Only then did he holster his Colt with the same smooth motion he'd drawn it, like it was just another part of his farm work. Kaela stepped outside, rifle still cradled. "They'll be back," she said quietly. Roan nodded, studying the tainted irrigation ditch. "With more men next time." His mind was already racing through preparations. Time to send word to Darren Quell. He turned to Kaela, seeing the question burning in her eyes. "It's time you learned the truth about Richmond." The sun sank low, painting the wheat fields in blood red and gold. Roan Vexley stood staring at the darkening sky, knowing the quiet life he'd built had just cracked open. The past he'd buried was clawing its way back, and now every secret he'd kept would have to surface. Yet as he felt the familiar weight of the Colt at his side, he knew some ghosts were meant to rise, especially when everything you love is under threat. Inside the farmhouse, Kaela began preparing supper, her movements steady and controlled, just as her father had taught her. Through the window, she watched Roan patrol the perimeter of their land. Like a man who had spent a lifetime learning how to survive when the world turns hostile, she'd always sensed there was more to him than a quiet man tilling soil. And now, as the first cold shadows of autumn stretched across the land, she was about to uncover the truth. Dark skills long buried, but perhaps the only thing standing between their family and a storm that refused to pass them by. Just 20 miles east of Roan Vexley's homestead, deep in a weather-beaten hunting cabin beneath ancient cottonwoods, Rook Naller's rage exploded. He hurled the silver-handled Remington against the splintered wall with a crack. His men stood tense, watching as their leader's mask of composure cracked. 10 years, Naller growled, storming across the cramped wooden room. 10 damn years building this outfit, and none of you fools recognize the name Vexley? His icy glare settled on Thorne Sedge, his grizzled second in command. Sedge shifted uneasily, the ghost of his old Confederate cavalry days still lingering in his stance. That wasn't his name back then, Rook? He muttered. In Richmond during the siege, they called him the Ghost. Naller snapped. Union Army's favorite nightmare. His finger traced the scar down his left cheek, a gift from the war he never quite buried. I should have known. The way he moved. Those eyes. Ain't many left who can draw that fast. Some of the younger outlaws exchanged puzzled glances. Bryn Cotter, the cocky upstart who'd spat into Vexley's irrigation trench, spoke up. What's the big fuss? He's just a farmer. We come back with more guns. The laugh that left Naller's mouth was dry and bitter. Farmer? He hissed. That man once held off a Confederate regiment, alone, in the pouring rain. 2 hours, 43 confirmed kills. He grabbed Bryn's shirt, yanking him close. They called him the Ghost for a reason. If he wanted you dead, you never even heard the shot. Just woke up to your sentries with slit throats, exploding ammo, supplies gone, like a shadow with a blade. That was war, Sedge said lowly. Different time, different rules. War or not, Naller said, releasing Bryn. A man like that doesn't forget, doesn't turn soft. He's been planning. Did you see that land? Every tree, every fence, perfectly placed. Clear sight lines from every direction. A thick silence followed. Only the wind whispering through cottonwoods broke it, along with a hawk's distant cry. Then, from the window, Dax Harrell, their scout, spoke. We could still take him. He's got to sleep sometime. Naller's expression shifted, fury giving way to calculation. No, we do this smart. He unrolled a worn map onto the battered table. This land's shifting. Railroads pushing through 50 miles south. Armies pulling troops to deal with tribal uprisings near Fort Laramie. It's the perfect time to rewrite the rules. And that farm, it's sitting in the heart of it all. Vexley's water rights, his pull with local tribes. He's holding power he doesn't even know. What about the girl? Bryn muttered, rubbing his collar. His daughter. Kaela, Sedge supplied. Saw her at the house, got her mama's fire. Naller's eyes narrowed. You knew his wife? Sedge nodded. Isolde Marin, best sharpshooter in Virginia till Vexley showed up. They met during the Petersburg campaign. She ran intel for the Union. His eyes dimmed. She died in childbirth. The girl lived. Then we've got his weakness. Naller smirked. But Sedge shook his head. No, that love won't make him weaker. It'll make him lethal. Before Naller could answer, Kess Dorman, the latest recruit on lookout, burst through the door, face flushed. Riders coming, 4 of them, from the south, pack horses loaded heavy. Naller moved to the window. A glint of satisfaction lit his face. Well, boys, looks like Providence just sent us a blessing. He turned, fire returning to his voice. Clean this dump up. Let's greet our guests properly. Minutes later, 4 hardened men rode in, led by a tall figure in a black duster and wide-brimmed hat. The soldier beneath the outlaw still lingered in his posture. Silas Drayven, once a major in the Union's Shadow Corps. Men who handled the kind of missions no official ledger dared mention, post-war. Drayven hadn't let go of those talents. He just found more profitable ways to use them. "Curtis," Drayven greeted, dismounting with grace, while his men stayed alert, hands close to their holsters. "Your message sounded urgent." Naller motioned them inside. "Major, you've got no idea. Boys, help 'em unload. Something tells me we're about to make history." Inside, as Naller laid out the plan across the map, Drayven remained stone-faced until he heard the name, Roan Vexley. Drayven echoed, as if testing the weight of it in his mouth. His eyes darkened, voice lowering. "Well, there's a ghost I never thought I'd cross paths with again." Roan Vexley. Silas Drayven stared into the low flames, then looked up at Rook Naller with grim certainty in his voice. "I saw him, with my own eyes. Still got that damn speed." Drayven leaned back slowly. "Last time I crossed paths with him was 65, just after Richmond crumbled. He was hunting deserters, men who preyed on refugees, found every last one, left their corpses strung like warnings. Even the meanest raiders got the message." Naller folded his arms, eyes narrowing. "And this is the man you want holding the water rights when the railroad cuts through?" Drayven's laugh was dry, hollow. "You're still thinking too small, Rook. Vexley's not just in our way. He's a damn opportunity." He reached for one of the saddle packs and pulled out a wooden box. Inside, cushioned in padded cloth, lay glinting brass and steel, advanced military gear. Fresh out of the Army's stash, Drayven muttered, assembling a sleek rifle sight with a practiced hand. "Telescopic, precision-milled. Lets a good man hit targets too far for Vexley's old Colt." He smiled, tight-lipped. "And I didn't come empty-handed." Rook Naller admired the weapon, but Thorn's sedge piped up from the darkened corner of the cabin. "Won't matter how far we are if he spots us first. That man's got hawk eyes, knows every inch around that farm." "Then we change the rules," Drayven said coldly. "Vexley wins 'cause he controls the field. We take that away." He pulled out a map, detailed, clean, precise. Nothing like Naller's scrawled notes. "Railroad company ran engineers through here last spring. Every rise, creek, and ridge mapped clean. We use this." The room fell silent as more of Drayven's men arrived, hauling in gear, explosives, mirrors, even pigeons for long-range signals. This wasn't just a raid, it was a damn campaign. "How many more men can you bring?" Naller asked, already tallying numbers in his head. 20, just 2 days south," Drayven replied. "Veterans, all armed with these new rifles, and..." He produced a sealed letter. "We've got friends up high. In 3 weeks, that Army patrol that usually watches this patch of land? Reassigned. Conveniently. Vexley won't get help from that angle," he added. Sedge watched warily as the pieces came together. He'd seen this before, back in the war. Drayven saw people like chess pieces. Move 'em, sacrifice 'em. "What about the town?" Bryn Cotter asked. "Vexley's got friends there." Drayven's smile twitched wider. "That's where your boys come in. Stir just enough dust, petty trouble. Keep Sheriff Darren Quell and Flint Avon chasing ghosts. When it's time to move, Vexley'll be alone." Naller gave a slow nod. But Sedge noticed how Drayven's men had quietly taken positions inside the cabin. Clear sight lines, ready for anything. This wasn't an alliance. It was a quiet coup. Drayven was in charge now, and Naller either didn't see it or didn't care. Night settled heavy over the camp. Drayven's special ops background meshed with Naller's home turf knowledge. This wasn't going to be quick. It'd be a slow, calculated dismantling of Roan Vexley's entire world. Thorn Sedge volunteered for first watch, eager for fresh air. Outside, under the cottonwoods, with stars wheeling above, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were misjudging Vexley. The man wasn't just fast. He understood the darkness in men's hearts, knew how to turn a man's fear into his own weapon. Sedge touched the faded stripe on his coat, a relic of the old Confederacy. He remembered those nights when the legend of the Wraiths had been born. Drayven had maps, rifles, soldiers. But Vexley had something else. Patience. The kind that waits in silence until the exact right moment. As midnight drew near, Drayven's men moved like clockwork, posting guards with clean precision. They were sharp. The best Sedge had seen since the war. But he couldn't forget Vexley's eyes. When Naller had threatened Kaela Vexley, that wasn't just a gunman's stare. That was a father's fire. A soft whistle pulled Sedge's attention toward the trees. One of Drayven's scouts signaled with a tilt of his head. Another rider. Silent approach. No spurs, no saddle creaks. Whoever it was, moved like a shadow. The man dismounted and led his horse through the dark like it was second nature. Before he even stepped into the lantern light, Sedge knew the walk. Vayak, the most feared tracker in the territory, had just joined the game. Wells Farm, days before the storm. The man's scarred face and mismatched eyes already made him a ghost story to most. But it was his reputation that sent hardened gunmen stepping off the boardwalk. When Silas Drayven greeted Vayak, it wasn't with fear. It was with the sharp edge of familiarity. "Report?" "The town's just like you said," Vayak replied, his voice unexpectedly soft, almost careful. "Sheriff Quell's got 3 deputies, all green as spring grass. The bank hauls its shipment south every second Tuesday. Telegraph office shuts down at sunset." He pulled out a worn notebook, the pages filled with clean, deliberate sketches. "But I found something else at the Vexley place." His fingers tapped the pages, revealing details even Thorn Sedge, with all his frequent drop-ins, had missed. Fence posts angled just right for cover. A rise in the earth perfect for spotting riders before they got too close. Gaps in the tree line that weren't accidents. Every bit of it spoke of someone who knew trouble would come. Rook Naller raised an eyebrow. "Man's been prepping for a fight." Vayak shook his head. "Not prepping, teaching." He pointed to faint marks drawn on the barn door. Height measurements, for his daughter most likely. And here, behind the house, shooting positions. But for someone shorter, with a different line of fire. "Training her to stand with him," he added. Drayven's expression didn't flicker, but his tone carried weight. "Like father, like daughter. Isolde Marin's blood runs deep, I reckon." He glanced toward Rook. "Changes nothing. If anything, it helps. Vexley'll be too busy trying to shield her. Makes him easier to predict." Sedge watched as Vayak quietly rolled his sketches away. His reputation was that of a man who could follow a shadow across stone. But there was something else in the way he moved now. A heaviness, a pause not born of fear, but memory. "There's more," Vayak said, hesitation lacing his words. "Found tracks up near North Creek. Faint. Maybe 4, 5 Apache warriors." He paused. "They ain't threatening the farm. They're guarding it." The words hung like smoke in the low-lit cabin. Apache allegiance wasn't just dangerous, it could shift the whole game board. But Drayven leaned back, pleased. "Perfect," he murmured. We'll use it. Naller, start spreadin' talk about raids. Vayak, plant the signs. Burnt wagons, broken arrows. Sell the lie. When Vexley starts diggin', he'll look in the wrong direction. As the lanterns burned low, Drayven unfolded more of his plan. It wasn't just about Roan Vexley anymore. It was about taking hold of the entire region. Vexley's farm was merely the first domino. With the railroad closing in, the Iron Crest Company would tighten its grip, control water, trade, protection, everything. Sedge slipped out again, the air inside too thick with schemes. He found Vayak outside, already saddled and ready to ride. You knew him, didn't you? Sedge asked quietly. During the war, Vayak murmured, mismatched eyes catching a sliver of moonlight. Everybody knew the ghost. Not many saw him. Fewer lived to speak of it. He adjusted the reins. Drayven's running this like a military op. That's his mistake. Why's that? Because Roan Vexley ain't a soldier no more. He's a father, and that makes him more dangerous than any ghost. Without another word, Vayak vanished into the dark like smoke on canyon wind. The third morning. 3 days after Naller's men pulled back, calm returned to Wells' farm. But it didn't last. Rachel, now Kaela Vexley, was in the garden when she saw her father pause mid-swing with the post hammer. His hand slid toward the hidden colt tucked beneath the rail. But then he saw the rider, Darren Quell's familiar bay mare, and relaxed. Sheriff Quell, a man who'd served the territory for over 15 years, wore a weathered face full of worry as he dismounted. Heard you had visitors, he said without pleasantries. Roan didn't even look up, just kept hammering the post. Suppose word moves fast. 3 homesteads hit in 2 days. Nothing taken, just fences wrecked, wells fouled. Quell's voice lowered. It's moving in a circle, toward town. You're dead center. Kaela stepped closer with a bucket of water for the sheriff's horse, keeping her ears open. Her father's rhythm hadn't changed. But his eyes? She recognized that look. He was calculating. Apache? Roan asked flatly. Too clean, too staged, Quell said. Somebody wants us watching the wrong direction. He leaned in. Town council's meeting tonight. Railroad surveyors just rolled in, talking water rights and property claims. Feels convenient. Before Roan could respond, movement on the western ridge drew all eyes. A lone rider, proud, upright, shadowed in the morning sun, military. That'd be Drayven, Quell muttered. Says he's representing Eastern investors, but he's been poking around all the places with water. Roan Vexley stood tall, spine straight as a rifle barrel, his sharp gaze fixed on the rider drawing near. He knew the type. Men who led ghost units in wartime and now sold their skills to the highest bidder. From the corner of his eye, he watched Sheriff Darren Quell swing up into the saddle. Keep your guard up, Roan, Quell muttered, voice low. This world's changing faster than I can count bullets. With a kick of his boots, the sheriff rode off, leaving dust in his wake. The rider continued forward, closer now, his presence heavy in the morning air. Kaela Vexley backed toward the house, calm and careful, though her eyes were sharp. She'd seen her father's quiet signal. 3 fingers pressed against his leg. Their old code. Take cover, get a bead, let 'em think they've got the edge. The rider, Silas Drayven, halted about 30 yards out and removed his hat in a mock gesture of respect. Gray streaks ran through his hair, and the lines on his face told tales of old battles. But his eyes, those were still predator sharp. Mr. Vexley, he called out, voice smooth. Hope I ain't intruding on your morning. Roan didn't flinch. Long ride from town. That horse of yours looks parched. Thoughtful of you to drop by. Drayven dismounted with practiced ease and led his mount to the trough. Every movement was controlled, deliberate. The way a soldier moves when the war hasn't quite left his bones. You've built something mighty fine out here, Drayven said, eyes drifting over the land. Especially with this damn drought. Gotta say, it's impressive. God's been kind, Roan answered. Same as he always did when folks commented on the land. But Drayven's smirk hinted he wasn't buying the humility. He has, though from what I've seen, the Lord helps those who take matters into their own hands. His fingers casually rested on the saddle horn, right near the Remington holstered at his side. The same make he'd handed to Rook Naller once upon a time. Your irrigation system, Drayven went on. Downright brilliant. Army boys could learn a thing or two. The words lingered in the air, like heat off a barrel. Roan laid down his fence tools slow and steady. Sounds like you've been digging into things. I always research before making an investment, Drayven said, pulling a folded paper from his coat. I represent some well-funded interests back east. They're willing to make a generous offer for your property. Roan didn't so much as glance at the paper. Not interested? Drayven asked, still polite, though ice crept into his tone. You haven't heard the terms yet. Don't need to. Roan's voice was like steady thunder, quiet but sure. World's moving, Mr. Vexley. Rail lines are coming. Territory's expanding. A man either makes friends in high places or learns how to disappear. Roan stared him down, unshaken. That same quiet strength that once made the Nallers 6 back off now filled the space between them. Funny thing, Drayven said, grinning wider. These days, being left alone is a luxury, not a right. Especially for men with colorful pasts. The tension stretched tight. Kaela, watching through her scope, saw it plain, how both men shifted ever so slightly. Warriors, each one braced for the crack of gunfire. That scar Rook Naller's carrying, right nasty. Drayven went on, like they were just shooting the breeze. Says it's from Richmond. War wounds are funny like that. They tend to fester, never know when they'll bleed again. Roan's voice was soft, but it cut through the silence. Wounds go both ways, Major. Some men learn from them. Others keep scratching till they open right back up. Drayven chuckled, a humorless, hollow sound. Wisdom from the Ghost of Richmond. Hell, I've heard it all now. He swung back onto his horse with a smooth motion, never breaking eye contact. Think about my offer. Railroad Commission meets next month. Would be a damn shame if someone started asking questions about your water rights. Legitimacy's a fragile thing. As Drayven rode off, Kaela rose from her spot, rifle still steady in her grip. He knows, she whispered. About Richmond. About who you were. Roan didn't answer right away. He just watched the man ride into the distance. He knows more than that, he finally said. Drayven doesn't play cards unless the deck's already stacked. Inside, Roan pulled up a loose floorboard and reached for the old box. Kaela had only seen it once, when rustlers had come sniffing around their cattle. Now, with her father opening it again, she understood. Papers, orders, commendations, and one weathered photograph, Roan Vexley, younger, surrounded by grim, silent men. No ranks, no patches, no unit name, just ghosts. Your mama took that, Roan murmured, thumb brushing the photo's edge. Petersburg, 64, Special Operations. We were Vexley's wraiths. He looked at the image, the weight of memory pressing down. Drayven led the other side, their own ghosts, Drayven's shroud. 2 phantom units, each trained to hunt the other, had spent the war chasing shadows through its darkest corners. Roan Vexley stared down at the old photo, seeing her father in a light she'd never imagined before. That deep scar on his neck. It was Silas Drayven's mark. Roan's fingers drifted to it instinctively. "Last time we crossed paths," he said, voice far off. "A raid went south. He lost half his men, and I lost more than blood." His eyes turned distant. "War don't just take lives, Kaela. It changes a man. Some come back and build something worth holding on to." He glanced out toward the horizon, where Drayven had vanished into the dust, and others just find new battlefields. The rest of the day wore a mask of normalcy, but Kaela noticed the subtle ways her father moved, checking rifle slits in the barn wall, ensuring the escape trails were still clear, taking extra care with the root cellar stockpile. What had once seemed like paranoid routine now revealed itself as hardened strategy. As the sun dipped behind the ridges, shapes appeared on the high ground, silent riders. They didn't come close or draw weapons. They didn't have to. Their presence alone spoke volumes. "Drayven's staking out the land," Roan muttered, cool as ever. "Marking every angle so we know he can see us, anywhere. Trying to make us flinch," Kaela said, helping her father lock up the livestock. "Burn up our nerves watching shadows." "Exactly," Roan replied with the kind of grin only a hunter could wear. "Let 'em think we're rattled. Let 'em think they've got the reins. A man like Drayven, his pride's his blind spot. He believes he's always the smartest gun in the standoff." Just after sundown, the first shot cracked through the silence. A single round shattered a window upstairs. Kaela hit the dirt instinctively. Roan didn't even blink. "Warning shot," he said, gaze scanning north. 800 yards, North Ridge. Telescopic sight, maybe a new Whitworth. Drayven's showing off. More shots followed in the hours ahead. None struck flesh or broke anything vital, but everyone was a whisper of menace. This was Drayven's brand of warfare. Nerves, pressure, psychological erosion. He'd mastered it back in the blood-soaked days of the rebellion. But what Drayven forgot, what he never truly understood, was that you couldn't unnerve a ghost. You couldn't spook a man who had built his entire life on surviving the unseen. By the gray blush of dawn, Kaela found her father in the barn. He was moving with calm precision, checking their weapons by lantern light. The old Colt rode on his hip as always, but now other tools had surfaced. A Spencer carbine, a Sharps rifle, and even a pair of balanced throwing knives. These were not a farmer's tools. They were weapons of a man who had once lived in the margins of shadow warfare. "It's time you knew all of it," Roan said, his voice heavy with years of silence. "What happened in Richmond, what your mother really was, why we came to this patch of land." He handed her a worn, leather-bound journal. Kaela opened it and recognized the clean, careful handwriting at once. "Your mother, Isolde. She was more than Union intel. She dug up something big, a chain of names, land grabs, dirty contracts. Secrets folks would kill to keep buried." Kaela's fingers trembled slightly as she flipped through pages of dates, maps, connections, all roads leading back to the same circle of men. "This is why Drayven's really here," she whispered. "It ain't about the land or the railroad, is it?" Roan's nod was grim. She uncovered a conspiracy, blood money masked as progress. Drayven was part of it, still is, far as I can tell. Outside, the first rays of morning revealed new boot tracks skirting the property's edge. Drayven's men had tested the perimeter overnight, measuring responses, checking for gaps. They'd found only what Roan wanted them to. War taught me one thing, he said, watching the sunlight wash across the horizon. Victory don't always belong to the fastest draw. Sometimes it goes to the man who waits, who lets his enemy think he's already won, until it's too late. And that's when Kaela finally understood. This wasn't just a homestead. It was a battlefield carved into the land by a man who never really came home from the war. As Harrison's men set up camp on the far ridges, Kaela knew her father's patience was about to be tested, and the future of the territory would be written in the lines of this land. But the sun hadn't yet reached the treetops when a new figure emerged from the mist, moving like a wraith from memory. Vayak. He stepped through the haze without sound, his mismatched eyes sweeping across the farmstead with trained precision. No visible weapons, which, for a man like him, meant everything was hidden and lethal. "Fine setup you've built here," Vayak said, voice low and oddly soft. "Reminds me of a place long gone. Petersburg, maybe?" A flicker of what might have been a smile crossed his face. "Drayven's got 32 posted, 8 with new Whitworths, others with standard army rifles. Signal points on 3 ridges, coordinated movements." He scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Then again, that's what he wants you to see." Kaela stayed near the barn, quiet, observing. The two men moved like wolves, measuring each other with silence. "Why now, Vayak?" Roan finally asked. "Because a man once pulled me out of fire when he didn't have to. That man deserves fair warning." His gaze drifted back to the ridges. "Drayven's planning a strike. Tonight, new moon, clean cover. But that's just the opening act. The real game's with the Railroad Commission," Vayak said, turning serious. "They're not just reviewing rights. They're redrawing the map. Harrison's men sit in every office from here to Dusthold. By the time folks catch on, it'll be carved in stone." Roan studied him, nodding slowly. He knew all too well. The fight wasn't just for land anymore. It was for the soul of the West. "You're working for him." "I get paid to track, Roan. What they do with what I find, that ain't on me." Vayak tipped his hat against the rising sun. "But some debts go deeper than coin. Petersburg taught me that." He slid a folded paper from inside his coat, then placed it gently on the fence post. "Drayven's real hand. Thought you ought to see it." Then, with the same silent grace he always had, Vayak stepped back and vanished into the morning haze, as if he'd never been there. Roan Vexley waited until he was alone. Then he picked up the paper, scanned the contents, and his jaw tightened. Without a word, he handed it to Kaela. Her eyes narrowed as she read, troop placements, influence networks, whispers of deals stretching from local townships all the way back east to Washington's polished floors. "Drayven's building an empire," Kaela muttered, "and the railroad's just the bait." Roan checked the chamber on his Colt with methodical calm. "That's why he don't just shoot us. He needs to wreck our names first, make us look like stubborn dirt farmers raging against progress." As the day wore on and the heat settled over the land, Kaela noticed the change in her father's rhythm. He no longer watched and waited. Now he moved with intention. Every nail he drove, every tool he laid out, had a purpose. By late afternoon, new riders crested the ridge. But these weren't Drayven's men. They were locals, ranchers, folks whose lives had been upended by the same creeping shadow. Word had spread. One of the first to dismount was young Jedvin Thorne. His family's well had been poisoned just 3 nights past. His father, Garrick, rode in beside him, an old war man once under Roan's command, though the boy never knew it. "Ain't right," Garrick said, jaw locked with fury. They talk of progress like it's a gift. All we seen is threats and fences we didn't ask for. Sheriffs no help. Too busy chasing ghost raids that don't feel real. One by one, the farmers shared the same story. And it became clear Drayven wasn't just pushing for land. He was setting the future in stone. Roan stood in the yard, listening like a general before battle. Calm, measured, and when he finally spoke, the whole crowd leaned in. Then a rifle cracked from the north ridge. Panic swept through the group. Families dove for cover. But Roan stood still, raised his spyglass, and tracked the rider fleeing back toward Drayven's post. "Shot wasn't meant to kill," he muttered. "Just meant to rattle the cage." Kaela helped usher folks back toward the trail, showing them safer routes home. But more than safety, she gave them something else. Resolve. Each family left with fire in their eyes, no longer feeling alone. As the sun dipped low, storm clouds rolled in from the west, thunderheads stacking high like sentinels, the kind of night storm soldiers once moved beneath. Roan just smirked. "Your mama used to say," he told Kaela as they secured the house, "the best trap ain't the one that spills blood. It's the one that makes a man destroy himself." Kaela flipped through his Oldemarin's old journal, the one full of whispers and warnings. "That's why we're letting them come," she said slowly. "We're baiting them, just enough to make them commit hard." Roan's faint smile held shadows of the ghost he used to be. "Drayven thinks he's fighting a war of guns and rifles, thinks tactics will win it." He checked the priming on his Colt again. But what he forgot from Richmond is this. War was killing. Justice is what comes after. His eyes burned with certainty. Justice means the right men fall, and they fall hard. The storm broke just after nightfall, thunder booming like distant artillery. Rain swept over the land in sheets, masking the quiet approach of riders and boots. Inside the barn, Kaela crouched in the hayloft, rifle ready, counting lightning flashes between rolls of thunder. The wind howled, but it wasn't just the storm that moved. A flash lit the yard, shadowy figures slipped through the rain. Kaela froze. Their movements weren't precise like Drayven's shroud. They were sloppier, more desperate. "Rook Naller's gang," she whispered through the speaking tube to the house. "He's using them like throwaways." Roan's voice came steady in reply. "How many?" 8, maybe 10. But they ain't moving clean." "Good," Roan answered. "Let 'em test the fence. Let 'em think we're asleep." Because tonight wasn't about bullets. It was about patience, about proof, about setting the board for a war that wouldn't be fought in blood, but in ink and truth. The kind of war Roan Vexley had been ready for all his life. "They don't know about the South pasture." Kaela Vexley's voice was barely above a whisper. Roan's quiet laugh held no amusement. "Drayven's holding his best cards, watching what we do with the first batch of fools. The way this gang moved proved it. They weren't trained soldiers. They came in loud, overconfident. Sure, they noticed the fortified windows and fencing, but missed the finer traps Roan had laid over the years. The kind of details only a soldier-turned-farmer would think to build. Irrigation ditches that could flood on command. Sight lines kept clear through knee-high crops. Hidden trails that let defenders slip unseen from post to post. Then lightning ripped the sky wide, and Kaela saw it. A glint beneath an oilskin wrap. Dynamite. Her breath caught. They weren't just poking the fence anymore. They came to blow it down. Before she could shout a warning, chaos erupted. One of Roan's tripwires snapped, unleashing a clatter of tin cans rolling down a gravel path. Horses spooked, rearing and bucking. The gang's coordination shattered in seconds. And just like that, Roan Vexley stepped from the shadows. Not ran, not rushed, just appeared. Like a ghost from war stories folks never dared repeat. The first man raised his rifle and never finished the motion. Roan disarmed him with a single move and dropped him cold. The second got a shot off, but it flew wide. Roan moved like wind dodging branches, his Colt already in hand, almost too fast to see. A crack of thunder masked the pistol's report, sending the shooter's gun spinning into the mud. "That's far enough," Roan said, voice cutting through rain and noise. "Next one won't be a warning." 3 more men darted to flank him, but forgot about Kaela. 2 sharp reports rang out from the loft. Both shots hit dirt at their boots. Precision shooting that said, "We've got you dialed in." Roan's voice turned casual, like he was chatting over coffee. "Your boss is likely watching. Probably got scopes on us right now. But he ain't gonna lift a finger. Men like Silas Drayven? They don't waste time protecting hired blades." Lightning crashed again. The rain lit up a dozen figures caught in awkward crouches, rifles half raised. One man still clutched the dynamite, now visibly shaking. "Might want to drop that, son," Roan warned. "Storm like this, metal caps don't play nice with lightning." The kid fumbled, nearly dropped the charge, then gently laid it in the muck. As if to prove Roan's point, lightning slammed into a tree on the far ridge, right where Drayven's scouts had been perched. Shapes scrambled in retreat. Kaela stayed fixed in her perch, rifle steady, while Roan calmly disarmed the rest. He moved with deliberate ease, no need to intimidate. His presence did that on its own. These weren't hardened killers from the Drayven's shroud. They were local bruisers, barroom toughs who'd never stared down a ghost from Petersburg. Roan addressed them flatly. "2 ways this ends. You ride off, tell folks this farm ain't worth the blood. Or you keep coming and find out why they used to call me a ghost." He paused, tone low and even. "I know your names, your families, where y'all sleep at night. I've had 10 years to learn this land, same as I learned every face on it." The threat wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. One of the younger attackers, barely past boyhood, stepped forward, shaking. "Mr. Vexley, sir, we didn't know. Naller told us it'd just be a scare job. Get you to fold. He didn't say nothing about you." Roan's words were soft, but cut like a knife. "Well, now you do. Question is, what'll you do with that knowledge?" The storm rolled east, but it left behind 10 drenched men, no longer breathing threats. They mounted up and rode out, but they didn't leave empty. They carried a story, and by morning, that story would echo through every saloon and fence-lined camp across the dust hold. That Roan Vexley, the ghost from a war no one spoke of, had humbled a gang without spilling a drop of blood. Kaela climbed down after the last rider vanished, finding her father crouched beside the discarded dynamite. "They'll be back," she said quietly. Roan nodded. Drayven don't quit after a stumble. But then he turned over the charge, studying the markings. Army issue, fresh stock, not local. This ain't Black Powder Pete's work. This is government chain, means Drayven's got folks in brass backing him. Kaela's eyes widened. It wasn't just water rights or land anymore. The corruption Isolde Marin had once whispered about ran deeper than even Kaela had feared. As they resecured the farm, she noticed it. Her father had shifted. The humble farmer's mask had dropped. What remained was something forged in battle. The tactician, the fighter, the leader. "You let him see it," she whispered. "You wanted witnesses. Roan checked the Colt, reholstered it. Drayven won't flinch at a threat. But his men? They're the kind that pass fear along like wildfire. Then, a sharp crack. A bullet slammed into the water trough with pinpoint precision. Kaela didn't flinch. "He's letting us know he's still watching," she said. Roan just smiled. "Good. Means he's starting to worry." And as the first light of dawn crawled over the horizon, new riders appeared, this time from the valleys and hills. Not Drayven's men, neighbors, ranchers, folks with dirt under their nails and guns in their hands. Word had traveled fast. They weren't just looking for safety. They were looking for Roan Vexley, a man worth following. They weren't soldiers. They were ranchers, mothers, sons, old hands and young bucks with dirt-stained boots and calloused hands, folks who'd lived off this land longer than most maps remembered. But now, they were something else. They were the Dust-Hold Pact, and they stood not for blood, but for justice. The legend of Roan Vexley was stirring again, not as a killer, but as a symbol, a man carved from the worst of war who'd chosen peace, and now had no choice but to defend it. And as Kaela Vexley watched the quiet fire return to her father's eyes, she knew Silas Drayven's worst mistake wasn't threatening their farm. It was reminding Roan who he used to be. Because the most dangerous man ain't always the one who shoots fastest. Sometimes, it's the one who knows how to make his enemy defeat himself. Dawn cracked the sky in long gold strokes as Roan started organizing the resistance. Drayven had his army training, his political strings, and the backing of the Iron Crest Company. But he'd forgotten a hard lesson from the war. Ghosts fade. They don't die. And the ghost of Petersburg wasn't riding alone this time. The calm broke with the pounding hooves of a lathered horse. Harlan Merce, the jittery telegraph operator from town, nearly tumbled off his mount as he skidded into the yard. His vest was soaked with sweat and trail dust, spectacles askew on his nose. "Mr. Vexley," he called, barely catching his breath. "Had to ride straight through. Wires have been hot all morning. Trains rerouted, troop movements canceled. Someone's clearing the board." Roan helped him dismount, calm and steady. "So Drayven's reach stretches farther than we figured." "Not just that," Harlan said, fumbling through his satchel. "I cracked a few of these codes. Same encryption y'all used in the war, ghost unit patterns." Kaela watched her father's face darken as he scanned the pages. He didn't just see messages, he saw the strategy. "They're reviving our old hunting grounds," Roan muttered, voice like gravel. "Drayven's not just moving troops, he's trying to rebuild the war." And that chilled the air. Both sides had once used elite shadow squads, Vexley's wraiths, and Drayven's shroud. Now, it looked like those ghosts were being stirred up again. Another rider came through. Tavern Creed, one of the local ranchers, with his teenage son Korik trailing close. The boy held something wrapped in oilcloth. "Found this down by North Creek," Tavern said. "Korik recognized it from your war stories." Roan took the cloth and unwrapped it slow. A glint of brass and steel caught the light. "British rangefinder," he told Kaela. "Drayven's boys are marking every ridge, every angle." "Why leave it behind?" Korik asked, brows tight. Roan's smile was grim. "Because they wanted us to find it. Message is clear, they can hit us from anywhere, but they slipped." He turned the device in his hand, fingers tracing familiar wear. "This model? We used it. I know where it fails." By mid-morning, more folks rode in with stories. Strange men measuring land, marking trees, mapping out routes like surveyors with rifles. Kaela coordinated the flow of intel, while Roan stood beneath the oak tree teaching basic tactics. How to vanish into gullies, how to use wind and branches to speak without sound, how to make shadows your ally. He wasn't training soldiers, he was teaching survival. "They're counting on us to act like an army," Roan told the crowd. "But we ain't fighting a war. We're defending homes." He demonstrated how to move like a whisper, how to spot a glint of glass from half a mile out. These were the skills that had made him legend, now passed to hands that had only ever known plows and branding irons. Then, a shot rang from the distant ridge. Another one of Drayven's messages. Only this time, nobody flinched. Instead, the ranchers calmly shifted position, applying what Roan had just taught him. "You see their rhythm?" he asked Kaela. "Same spacing, same timing. That's military pattern. They'll keep this up till sundown, make us react, wear us down." Kaela nodded. "While the real force circles in." "Exactly," Roan said. "Drayven's all smoke and mirrors, always was. Makes him easy to read if you ain't dazzled by his brass." Then came another rider, approaching from the east. Roan's hand went to his colt, but relaxed when he saw the gate. Veyak, the half-feral tracker, slid off his horse and scanned the camp with mismatched eyes. "Quite the militia you've built, Ghost," he said, voice low and amused. "Not a militia," Roan corrected. "A community." Veyak tilted his head toward the ridge. "Drayven's boys are pulling back, changing posture. They figured out we ain't playing their game." Roan lifted his spyglass. Sure enough, formations were shifting, positions consolidating. He's used to controlling the board. Now the pieces are moving on their own. Veyak pulled out a worn map, marked with neat red dots. "Main force is setting up in Thunder Canyon. 50 men, armed heavy. But that ain't what's got me spooked." He pointed at smaller dots creeping toward the borders. "These pairs? Quiet, careful, tight formations. That's not militia." Roan's eyes narrowed. "That's shroud work. Drayven's elite." Kaela's voice was a whisper behind him. "You think he'll try to finish what Petersburg started?" Roan stared at the horizon, where smoke coiled lazily toward the sun. "No," he said. "He's going to try to erase it." Roan Vexley leaned over the map spread across the table, tracing her fingers along the lines. "They ain't just circling us," she muttered. "They're herding us, like cattle into a chute." "Sharp eyes," Veyak said with a nod of respect. "Just like your mama. Isolde would be mighty proud." As dusk settled over the dust-holed Pack's farmland, Roan Vexley gathered the town's key folks inside the old barn. It had been stripped of hay and tools, now a full-fledged war room, maps pinned across wooden beams, assignments etched in chalk across the walls. Every soul had a role, and they knew it. "They'll come tonight," Roan declared, his voice a calm storm. "Not all of them, just the best. Drayven's shroud will send their shadows first, his ghost hunters." He looked around the room, reading the weight behind every pair of eyes. "They'll count on us being bone-tired and fixated on the obvious paths." Tavern Creed stepped forward, jaw clenched. "We're with you, Roan. Just say the word." But Roan's reply was cut short by a string of sharp reports echoing from the ridge. Not the usual pattern of pot shots, they were signals. And Roan knew them. So did Kaela. "Old Ghost Unit Code," she said. "Vexley's Wraith style." "What's it mean?" someone asked. Roan's face darkened. "They're calling me out, trying to drag the ghost back from the grave." He holstered his Colt with muscle memory honed in blood. Silas Drayven's pushing me, seeing if I'll bite like I did in '64. Those gathered stared as Roan's frame seemed to change before their very eyes. The quiet farmer they thought they knew slipped away like a shed skin, revealing a man honed by war, haunted by the shadows he once walked among. But there was something more now. A calm steel forged in the fires of love and loss. Tonight, he told them, you'll understand why the ghost haunted more than battlefields. But you'll also see why fear was never the part that mattered. His gaze fell on Kaela, and he saw in her the same flame that had burned in Isolde's eyes, the same fire that once stopped outlaws cold. They think they're hunting a memory, Roan said. Let's show him what a ghost becomes when he's got something real to protect. Night fell like a hunter's trap over the Vexley land. Thunder cracked overhead as rain poured down, turning the dirt to swamp and the barns to labyrinths of shadow. Roan drifted through the storm like mist on the ridgeline, checking each hideout. Everyone else had been sent home. This fight needed hands trained in a different way. Only Kaela remained, crouched in the barn's hidden perch, her rifle steady. Roan had tried to send her away. They'll expect I'm alone, he had warned. Drayven knows how I move. Kaela's answer had been clear. Then let's show him how we move. Just after midnight, the change came. The chirp of crickets on the eastern line skipped a beat. Roan felt it in his bones. Here they come, he whispered. A bolt of lightning lit the fields, and he saw 'em. Shadows cut through the storm, not sloppy like Rook Naller's boys, but tight, surgical. Teams of two, leapfrogging. They moved like Roan used to. 6 pairs. Kaela's voice crackled through the old brass tube. Vexley's Wraiths formation. Drayven seein' if I still remember the dance, Roan replied. He watched as the raiders silently claimed the outer barn, textbook execution. But they didn't know the playbook had changed. The first team inside triggered Roan's invention, a rigged collapse of hay bales and beams that dropped like thunder. The invaders scrambled for cover, just as Roan's voice echoed through the storm. Evening, gentlemen. Welcome to my parlor. His voice came from everywhere. The barn's acoustics, tuned over a decade, turned it into a maze of echoes. The soldiers tensed. The barn didn't feel right. Angles were off. Shadows twisted unnaturally. Defensive spots they'd scouted were gone. Drayven taught you well? Roan's voice taunted from the walls. But he trained you to fight soldiers. I hunt ghosts. A shot rang out, someone spooked by a flicker. The muzzle flash revealed the truth. Mirrors, hidden across the walls. Their every move was being seen, doubled, tripled, distorted. Then Kaela's voice joined in. You've got 1 shot to back off. After that, we stop being polite. It wasn't a bluff. These men knew the name Isolde Marin, knew the legends of how she turned the art of fear into a battlefield weapon. Now her daughter stood in her place. Outside, the other teams waited in vain for a signal that would never come. The rain pounded harder. And then the dark shifted. Roan Vexley stepped from the storm, more phantom than man. He moved like water around stone. 1 pair of attackers on the north approach never even saw him. 1 second standing, next disarmed and crumpled. The second pair raised rifles, but their bullets hit only fog. Roan Vexley moved like a man who danced with death before. His blows weren't wild or brutal. They were precise, bone-deep strikes meant to end a fight without killing. Out by the barn, Kaela Vexley proved she hadn't just learned to shoot. She'd learned to think like a tactician. Using the mirror system they'd built into the loft and the old support beams, she conjured illusions of movement that sent Harrison's raiders chasing shadows. The men, trained and confident, suddenly found themselves wrapped in a noose of misdirection. The very tactics they'd relied on, twisted against them. A flare ripped through the rain-dark sky. Silas Drayven was calling his men to fall back. But retreat was part of Roan's design. The raiders turned toward what should have been clear exit paths, only to find them altered, rerouted, narrowed like cattle chutes. Vexley had counted on their playbook. He broke them not with force, but with doubt, stripping them of the edge their commander had drilled into them. 2 raiders made it furthest, almost reached the tree line. But then came Roan's voice, low and cold behind them. Drayven won't like this. The 2 spun. One lunged with a blade. Roan didn't strike back. He disarmed him with a single smooth motion, the knife vanishing into the mud. "You've got a choice," Roan said, voice calm as thunder before the storm. "Go back to Drayven. Admit you failed. Wait for the hammer to fall, or what?" The other snapped. Roan's stare was steel. "Or understand, loyalty, like fear, cuts both ways. Drayven's playing a deeper game, one that'll crush more than just this farm." The raiders hesitated. Then the knife wielder gave in. "The Railroad Commission meeting. It's in 3 days. Drayven's men are posted all across the territory, waiting." His partner started to object, but Roan shut it down with a whisper. "You're doing the right thing. He'll bleed you dry and toss what's left." By dawn, Roan and Kaela had secured their captives and gathered the scattered weapons. The storm had passed, leaving the land slick with mud. But the air held a new tension. The balance had shifted. Kaela found her father examining a captured rifle, eyes narrowed. "They'll tell him everything," she said. "The mirrors, the echoes, all of it." Roan's smile was grim. "That's not what'll spook him. What'll haunt him is that his best men saw something new. A way of fighting that turns fear back on itself." As sunlight touched the homestead, 12 of Drayven's elite were accounted for, not by bullets alone, but by something more dangerous: doubt. And Kaela could see it in her father. He wasn't celebrating. "What is it?" she asked. Roan looked out toward the distant ridge where scouts would surely be watching again. It was too easy. Drayven's smarter than this. He sent those men here knowing they'd fail. Why? Because now he knows we're thinking like ghosts again, using deception, strategy. He wanted to see how far we'd go. Roan's expression turned hard. And now, he'll adapt. Because the next fight won't be in the dark, it'll be in daylight, in courtrooms, with badges and papers. That's where he'll strike. Kaela felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. The enemy wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a politician with a war plan. Inside, they examined the raiders' maps, markings far beyond their land, water stations, telegraph hubs, tribal gathering grounds. "He's drawing up pressure points," Kaela muttered. "Everywhere control could tip." Roan pointed to coded notations. "He's not just staking claims. He's setting the stage to isolate the entire territory." Their planning was interrupted by a breathless arrival, young Harlan Mearse, the telegraph operator. "More encrypted transmissions," he said, handing over a stack of coded pages. "And the commission meeting's been moved. It's happening tomorrow." Roan didn't flinch, but Kaela noticed how his jaw tightened. "Drayven's accelerating." "And there's more," Mearse added. "Military patrols near Fort Laramie are being rerouted. Officially, it's Indian unrest, but it's staged." Roan nodded. "False flags. He's pulling troops away from where the real fight's coming." Kaela stared down at the map, connecting the dots. The farms, the telegraphs, the courts, the rails. He's not just after us. He wants the whole damn territory. Roan Vexley sat at the table, carefully disassembling his old Colt with the kind of focus that only came from experience and scars. His hands were steady, his motions precise. Classic move, he muttered to Kaela, eyes still on the weapon. Gain control through law, back it with force. Secure key spots before the enemy even knows it's under siege. Then came the crack of a rifle shot from the ridge. Another signal from Silas Drayven's watchers. Kaela leaned over the decoding board, her brow furrowed. This one's different. She read it aloud. He's offering terms, claims we've proven our point, says he's open to negotiation, something mutually beneficial. Roan let out a dry laugh that held no amusement. He ain't offering peace, he's testing the waters. Wants to see if what those raiders told him holds water. He grabbed the spyglass, scanning the ridgeline. Drayven knows those boys are gonna talk. He's probing, see how we react to his so-called olive branch. As the day stretched on, visitors trickled in. Neighbors from all corners of the dust-hold packed. They brought troubling reports. Cattle stampeded from water holes, fires breaking out at storage barns, telegraph wires going down without reason. Roan scribbled each one down in his logbook. It started, he told Kaela grimly. Drayven stirring the pot, making life hard so when he shows up with a badge and promises of order, folks will beg to be saved. The front gate creaked open again. This time, it was Vayak. The old scout moved like a shadow, quiet but with urgency in his eyes. Drayven's whole force is on the move, he said without any lead-up. Not just scouts or strike teams, whole damn operations packing up from Thunder Canyon. Roan's jaw tightened. Too soon for a full push, not unless the commission meeting ain't the real play. Kaela was already piecing it together. Maybe it's a smokescreen, a cover for something bigger. Vayak handed him a crumpled paper, weather-worn but still legible. Found it in a drop zone they left behind, mentioned something called Operation Kingmaker. Roan's expression darkened as he read it. Kingmaker, he echoed. Back in the war, that code meant total reset. Not just battles, whole systems toppled and rebuilt. Political, economic, military, all of it. Kaela's breath hitched. So he's not just after water rights or rails. He's rebuilding the damn map. As dusk settled over the farm, fresh signals flickered from the hills. Roan watched the patterns through the spyglass. They're sending mixed offers, he said. Each one crafted just enough to feel real, but each one aimed at someone specific. He's trying to sniff out our intel lines. Kaela watched him pen replies, using their old Vexley's Wraith's code, but tweaking key phrases. You're baiting him, she realized. Feeding back just enough to make him think we're confirming what he fears. Roan gave a nod. Drayven's weakness is his obsession with control. Right now he thinks he's tightening the noose, but we're the ones leading him by the nose. Kaela smirked, a glint of her mother's brilliance shining through. He'll start shifting pieces to fight threats that don't even exist. As twilight rolled across the hills, Roan stepped out onto the porch. He saw the faint flicker of movement in the distance. Drayven's long-reach men holding their posts. The raid had proven one thing. This wasn't just a power grab. It was a plan long in the making. Drayven was using the Iron Crest Company's expansion as camouflage, carving out control one legal deed at a time. But Roan Vexley wasn't just a ghost from the war. He was a man who'd mastered a deeper truth. The real fight wasn't waged with bullets. It was waged inside the mind. Your mother used to say, he told Kaela as they loaded ammo and stashed maps. The most dangerous weapon ain't the one you can see. It's the one you think you understand. Kaela chambered around with the ease of someone raised in it. Drayven thinks he's figured you out, Pa. Thinks he knows your next move. Roan's grin was slow, weathered by battles past. And that's why he'll never see it coming. The land stretched before them, gold fading into shadow. Drayven might have thought this was just about territory, but he'd kicked the wrong hornet's nest. Before dawn, another visitor arrived, Flint Avon, riding hard, his horse frothing despite the cold. The young deputy didn't wait for breath. "Judge Orlin Rusk's been taken," he said. "Federal marshals grabbed him overnight. Accusations of corruption, ties to tribal trades." Roan's face remained unreadable, but Kaela caught the twitch in his brow. "Rusk was the only man left with a spine on the bench," she said. "The only one Drayven couldn't buy." Roan handed the kid a tin mug of coffee. "Right on time," he muttered. "Silas ain't playing checkers anymore. He's clearing the board for something bigger." The day before the big railroad commission meeting, Flint Avon rode in with dust on his boots and bad news on his lips. "Ain't just the judge," he said with a grim nod. "Banks froze damn near every account in the region. Orders came straight from the territorial governor. Folks can't touch their savings, can't buy grain, gear, or feed. Towns are about to erupt." Roan Vexley laid out the territory map on the long table, her eyes scanning the scattered pins and inked notes. "It's a pattern," she murmured, eyes narrowing. "Each crisis, each fire, each accident looks separate, but together, it's all choreographed." Roan Vexley stood beside her, jaw tight as he studied the terrain. "Drayven's stoking panic," he muttered. "Setting up the fall just so he can come in with a solution. Which'll be unveiled tomorrow," Kaela added, tapping the map, "when his men propose a full rework of water rights and rail access. Everything he needs to lock this territory in his grip." Flint shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the door. "Sheriff Quell sent me with a warning," he said. "Drayven's men have been sniffing around Richmond, digging into your past." Roan didn't flinch. "Expected that," he said flatly. "A man like Silas Drayven doesn't just strike with bullets. He poisons reputations, makes honest folks look dirty so resistance feels like rebellion." Their conversation cut off when Vayak stepped through the fog like he'd risen from it. His face was hard, darker than usual, as he handed Roan a folder thick with papers. "Found this in a camp they left behind," Vayak said. "Military contracts, land deeds, pardons. All signed, all real." Roan flipped through the sheets, feeling the weight behind each seal and signature. "These ain't for show," he muttered. "These are genuine. He's got backers in places higher than we can reach." "Not just backers," Vayak added, voice low. "He's got partners. Men set to get rich the second he locks down this land." Kaela leaned in, her brow furrowing. "Look at this," she whispered, pointing to a list tucked in the pages. "Names, dates, locations. These are witnesses." Roan's face turned to stone. Several names he knew. Trusted. "And they're being taken out," he said. Orlin Rusk's arrest was just the opening shot. The morning passed in a steady stream of messengers. Farmers spoke of cattle going missing, supplies held back. Traders fretted about frozen accounts. Even tribal envoys showed up, warning of troops massing near sacred lands. Every thread pointed toward one thing: Drayven's storm was rolling in. Inside the barn, Roan and Kaela planned their counterstrike. The firefight the night before had bought them time, but the next wave wouldn't come from gun barrels. It had come wrapped in law and money. We've got to see the whole play, Roan told their allies, circling the map. Not just the commission, the whole structure behind it. That's when Harlan Mears, the wiry old telegraph man, burst in with a stack of transcripts. Traffic's picked up, he warned. Encrypted codes, multiple channels. They're orchestrating something big. Kaela took the messages and got to work decoding. Roan moved to the porch, spyglass in hand, watching Drayven's long-reach men shift position. They've changed formation, he said. Not just keeping an eye anymore. They're building a perimeter, filtering what gets through. Vayak returned again, his boots coated in dry canyon dust. More camps, empty now, he said. They're moving inward, but they're leaving gaps, big ones, on purpose, Kaela said, realization dawning. They want people to slip through. Roan nodded. He wants witnesses, he said. Folks who'll see what he wants them to see. So when the takeover hits, it'll look lawful, like the territory asked for it. The implications hit hard. Drayven wasn't just seizing power, he was dressing it in the clothes of legitimacy. Kaela scanned the recovered documents again. These pardons, these contracts, they're insurance policies. Once signed, everything's official. And challenging him, Roan said, means challenging the territorial government. He sat at the desk, pulling out aged papers and wax seals. Time to call in some old debts, he said. Mama's network? Kaela asked. Roan nodded. Isolde Marin didn't just gather intelligence. She built bridges with ranchers, scouts, lawmen, even outlaws. We're gonna need every last one of them. By midday, riders galloped out in all directions, each carrying a sealed letter, each using a different trail to dodge Drayven's eyes. A spiderweb of loyalty, spun years ago by Isolde, was being pulled tight. Drayven thinks he's the only one who knows how to play the long game. Roan told Kaela as the last rider disappeared over the ridge. But your mother taught me that true strength doesn't lie in land or laws. It lies in who shows up when everything falls apart. By sundown, more coded flickers came from the hills. But this time, Roan didn't just see them as signals. He saw them for what they really were. Traps baited with the illusion of order. They were just fragments of a broader illusion, scattered like dust to fool prying eyes into thinking Drayven's operation was smaller than it truly was. He's hiding his true hand, Roan Vexley murmured, brow furrowed over the kitchen table where the maps and notes lay, trying to make tomorrow's commission meeting look like the main play. Roan Vexley gave a slow nod, eyes still scanning the room like he was hearing echoes from a battlefield. Because it ain't, he said. Once he locks down the water rights, the rest comes falling into place like dominoes. Rail lines, military routes, even tribal agreements, Kaela added, all reworked under his authority. From the shadows, Vayak stepped forward, silent as always. His mismatched eyes swept the valley through the barn's side slats. Towns are swelling up, he muttered. Merchants, bankers, tribal leaders, all gathering for that meeting. But Drayven's men are setting up a silent blockade, steering who speaks and who don't. Roan's jaw clenched. He's fragmenting the opposition, keeping them feeling alone, like their concerns are isolated. He checked his belt gear like it was second nature, then paused. But he's forgotten what it means to chase ghosts. Kaela raised a brow. And what's that supposed to mean? Roan gave a small, quiet smile. Sometimes, ghosts don't gotta fight, just showing the truth's enough to bring the whole structure down. As dusk blanketed the dust-holed countryside, Roan Vexley sealed the last envelope of their counteroffensive. Drayven had spent years spinning his web, each thread laced with military precision and silent coercion. But he'd made one fatal misstep. Isolde Marin would have seen it from the jump. He'd pegged Roan as nothing more than a killer in exile, a tactical relic from a blood-soaked war. What he failed to grasp was that the man who once haunted Petersburg's ruins had become something far more dangerous. A man who understood that power built on lies could crumble under the weight of simple truth. That upcoming meeting wasn't just about irrigation lines or steel tracks. It was a crossroads for the soul of the frontier. Would it belong to men like Drayven, who saw justice as just another tool to twist? Or to the communities who stood shoulder to shoulder against the tide? Roan Vexley aimed to settle that score. Not with bullets. Not this time. And just as the last light bled over the ridgeline, another knock came at the door. William Hawthorne, territorial land clerk, retired and nearly forgotten, stood in the frame, a bundle of documents in one hand, and a world-wearied look on his face. "They're rewriting history," he said simply. He laid the papers out across the table. Land deeds, grant maps, water filings, all recently modified. Names altered, dates shifted, claims redrawn by degrees so subtle they'd pass as bureaucratic error, unless you knew what to look for. Roan poured coffee, while Kaela slid a lamp closer, eyes running over the forged trails. "How long's this been going on?" Hawthorne's hands trembled just slightly as he took the cup. "Months, maybe longer. At first, I figured they were fixing clerical mistakes. Now I see they're building a paper trail to make Drayven's grip look legal under the governor's eye." He spread out an overlay of maps, showing how whole swaths of territory had subtly shifted. Vayak stepped forward, brows drawn low. "They ain't just changing today's records. They're rewriting how the territory was born." Kaela's face went cold. "So when Drayven makes his move, it'll look like he's got the law on his side." Roan nodded. "Anyone trying to stop him would have to disprove decades of official history." Hawthorne pulled a final envelope from his coat, bearing a seal. "This just came in," he said, voice tight. "They're shipping me off to Washington. Promotion, they say. Train leaves first light." Vayak's tone was dry as desert bone. "Sounds like they're removing the witnesses." Roan studied the old man for a beat. "How'd you slip past Drayven's patrols?" A faint smile creased Hawthorne's weathered face. "Been riding these trails longer than his kind been breathing. Some paths ain't on maps." What Hawthorne brought filled critical gaps in the puzzle. Drayven wasn't just setting up a takeover. He was crafting a false foundation beneath the whole damn region. As night deepened, they combed through the files. One by one, threads emerged. Property disputes, tribal contracts, water leases, all twisted to build a new, fake history of control. "Roan," Kaela called softly. "Look here." She held up two nearly identical land grants. The original gave the community full water access. This version, it adds clauses, limitations Drayven's men can enforce. Rowan's face darkened. They ain't just changing who owns what. They're changing what ownership means. Vayak, ever the tracker, pointed at new lines on the map. "See this? They've redrawn routes, slow and quiet, creating choke points. Any trade or cattle movement has to go through their control zones." Roan grimaced. Economic strangleholds, hidden in ink. Flint Avon, who had returned quietly to help, looked overwhelmed. "How do we even fight something like this? He's covered every base." Roan didn't hesitate. "Not everyone." His voice held the iron steadiness that once turned tides in war. "They're counting on this scheme being so tangled, no one can unravel it. But complexity always has a weakness." Kaela's eyes met his. More moving parts, more things that can break. "Exactly." Roan leaned over the table. They needed dozens of clerks, notaries, office rats. Every one of them's a weak link if they find a reason to talk. Hawthorne looked up. Some of them will still care about the truth. They've been pushed into this. But if they see a way out... Roan grabbed pen and parchment, his hands steady. Then it's time to show 'em the way out. He started drafting coded messages, one after another, each destined for a clerk, a record keeper, a weary soul lost in Drayven's paper trail. He thinks tomorrow's about a commission, Roan said quietly. But we're going to make it about revelation. It's about more than just maps or contracts. Kaela Vexley murmured, her voice soft but sure. It's about the truth. Roan Vexley gave a faint nod, the old shadow of the man he'd once been flickering behind his eyes. Drayven spent years weaving this lie. Tomorrow. He paused, scanning the document spread before them. We start yanking on threads even he forgot he left hanging. Vayak stood nearby, silent and watchful, then finally spoke. Watcher patrols shifted again. Same pattern as last time. They're pulling tighter around key buildings, land office, telegraph station, town vault. Not just garden. They're cordoning them off. Roan narrowed his gaze. They're closing ranks. Don't want any unwanted eyes poking around while they rewrite the books. Kaela leaned over the map, connecting the marks with swift lines. They'll use tomorrow's commission meeting as cover. To finish changing the record, not just influence it. They'll rewrite history so clean, folks won't even know it happened. Roan exhaled, the weight of memory and resolve heavy on his shoulders. Your mother understood this kind of battle, he said quietly to Kaela. She knew not all wars are won with rifles and thunder. Some are won with ink and truth. As dawn's first gold began brushing across the ridge, their plan neared completion. For all the years Silas Drayven had spent weaving his web, layer upon layer of deceit and shadow, he'd made a fatal error. One Isolde Marin would have seen from a mile off. He thought control came from story, that if you built a tale complex enough, no one would dare question it. But Roan Vexley had learned different, digging into soil, raising cattle, living quiet. He'd found that the simplest truths were the hardest to bury. And no matter how thick the fog, the sun still rose. As daylight spilled over Salvation Creek, Drayven's grand illusion was about to meet something far more dangerous than armed resistance. Honest truth, carried by men and women who still believed in justice as something more than lines in a ledger. Mothers hustled their young indoors. Shopkeepers turned away from windows. Conversations died in mid-sentence. The Iron Crest men, dressed like deputies but moving like soldiers, patrolled the streets 2 at a time. Boots in rhythm, eyes dead cold. Same pattern as Petersburg, Roan muttered, adjusting the iron under his weathered coat. Break spirits first, then claim the land. Kaela walked beside him, noticing the ghost of something in her father's expression. You've seen this before. He nodded slowly. Your mother saw it first. Said occupation begins in the mind long before it reaches the door. Their silent march through the morning was broken when a figure stepped from the fog. Elizabeth Rusk, wife of the imprisoned judge. The proud steel in her spine hadn't dulled, but the toll of fear had crept into her face. They took everything, she said, falling into step with them. Not just Judge Rusk's court notes, his letters, journals, even family portraits. They're trying to erase him, piece by piece. Roan motioned her into the alley behind the general store, where shadows held some small comfort. What kind of letters? Letters about Drayven, she answered. From back before the war. Judge Rusk knew the man, knew what he was capable of. But that's not why I'm here. From her sleeve, she drew a worn envelope, its edges weathered but intact. They missed this one. Sarah wrote it. Rowan's breath caught. His hands trembled slightly as he took the letter, recognizing Isolde Marin's fine, deliberate handwriting. The date was just days before Kaela had been born, and before Isolde had died bringing her into the world. She knew, Elizabeth whispered. She knew what Drayven was building. Even while carrying Kaela, she tracked it all. Inside that envelope were names, events, patterns, everything they needed to unmask Drayven's operation. She hadn't just been gathering secrets. Isolde had crafted the key that could unravel it all. As Roan read, his jaw clenched tighter. This is why they locked up Rusk. Not for law or order, but because he had this. He knew. Elizabeth's eyes darkened. There's more. Drayven's men are asking around. About Isolde, about what she did during the war. They're setting the stage. Kaela stiffened. They're gonna say she was a traitor, that her info can't be trusted. Roan folded the letter with care, his face calm but his eyes burning with the fire of old battles. They're not just after us. They're trying to poison her memory, turn folks against the very truths she gave her life to record. Before they could speak again, Vayak emerged from the thinning crowd like smoke off a canyon wall. Problem, the tracker said, voice clipped. Drayven's bringing in more men, not fighters, suits, a federal judge, business tycoons, political men. Rowan's face turned grim. He's building an audience. Wants the right people watching when he unveils whatever scheme he's got cooking. Vayak gave a grim nod. Ain't all. They're clearing out the old mining office, turning it into some kind of showcase. Got documents, photos, even military records laid out like a carnival of lies. Elizabeth Rusk's face lost a touch of color. They're staging evidence during the commission meeting. Gonna claim they've got proof of corruption, of conspiracy. Enough to bury reputations for good. Roan Vexley's voice was like a slow knife. A show trial, he muttered, using that meeting as cover to tear down anyone who stands in their way. His hand grazed the folded letter hidden in his coat. He didn't have to say it. Isolde Marin's work was about to be dragged through the mud. Kaela stood at the window, watching as wagons rolled in, shopkeepers set up stands, and farmers filed into town, all pretending life was normal under the weight of Iron Crest rifles. We can't let it happen, she said, quiet but fierce. Not just for my mother's name, but for all the folks who risked everything helping her piece the truth together. Before Roan could answer, noise stirred near the town bank. Silas Drayven's men were marching a prisoner down the main road. Thorne Sedge, former second to Rook Naller. His uniform was torn, his face bloodied, but he walked upright, head unbowed. Vayak spoke again, a soft snarl behind his words. They're making examples. Anyone who knows too much, they drag him out, break him down in public. Roan narrowed his eyes. No, he replied slowly, eyes tracking the Iron Crest patrols. They're doing worse. They're making offers. Testify and walk free, or stay quiet and rot. They're building a case from confessions, not truth. And they're counting on fear to make it stick. The rhythm of town life had been swallowed by military precision. More wagons came, heavy with locked crates. Checkpoints sprouted on every corner. Members of the commission were led one by one into private rooms, walled off from any voice that might contradict the narrative. Elizabeth watched it all, lips pursed. James tried warning him, said Drayven wasn't just setting up shop, he was reshaping the whole damn territory in his image. New rules, new order. so deep no one could dig it out. Kaela's voice was sharp with resentment. And he's using Mama's name to do it. Painting her like she was the liar, the traitor, twisting her legacy into a weapon. Roan's tone dropped low and dangerous. Your mother knew men like Drayven, knew their kind don't fall to bullets or bluster. They fall when the truth cuts deeper than fear ever could. A single shot cracked from the direction of the land office. Not an ambush, a signal. In seconds, Iron Crest troops snapped into motion, moving with chilling coordination toward whatever the spotters had found. Vayak appeared out of nowhere, his eyes intense. They caught one of our messengers. Jedvin Thorne's boy. They're dragging him into the mine office now. Roan's jaw tightened. Drayven's growing restless, pushing up his timeline. He knows someone's playing against him, just don't know how deep the board runs. What do we do? Kaela asked, her voice steady despite the storm closing in. Roan's answer came with the same haunted calm he'd once carried through the siege at Petersburg. We let him think he's got the upper hand. Let him parade his lies, build his little theater. His eyes lit with something cold and familiar, and we let Sarah's truth hit him where it hurts most. Elizabeth looked toward him. You're saying this is all part of her plan? Roan nodded. Drayven forgot the one thing about ghosts. Sometimes they wait years before delivering their message. And Isolde Marin left one hell of a message for the man who tried to twist everything she died protecting. As the sun crept over the rooftops of Salvation Creek, Roan Vexley began putting in motion the plan that had waited a decade to be awakened. Drayven believed he was staging a masterstroke. A clean takeover, masked in law and order, signed in ink and sealed with fear. But he'd made a miscalculation, one Isolde had predicted long before the day she died. He thought he was hunting shadows. But what he'd stirred up was something worse. A truth preserved in silence. One no amount of forged papers or coerced witnesses could undo. The Ghost of Petersburg was about to teach them all that some legacies outlive even the strongest regime, and some truths refuse to stay buried. By mid-morning, more pieces of Drayven's scheme came to light. Harlan Mears burst into the Vexley house, gasping for air, holding crumpled transcripts in one fist. Intercepted fresh wires, he panted. Coded chatter confirms it. He's not just calling in witnesses. He's bringing in press, newspapermen, photographers. Hell, even someone from Harper's Weekly. Kaela read over the transcripts, then looked up with dawning clarity. This ain't just about control. It's about the story. He wants to shape what the rest of the world sees when they look west. Roan and Vayak exchanged glances. Kaela tapped the edge of a name on the list. These reporters, they ain't random. They're tied to the same publishers that tried to wreck the Union's intelligence network back in the war. The ones that called us liars. Roan's eyes darkened as he read over the list. Drayven ain't just trying to destroy Sarah's legacy. He's trying to rewrite the war itself. Make every informant, every operative, every piece of wartime truth look like a lie. Elizabeth's voice came low and urgent. If he pulls that off, every report Sarah ever collected, every danger she ever warned us about, becomes suspect. Their grim thoughts were broken by a sound in the street. Another prisoner. Iron Crest soldiers dragged a shackled figure through the dust. An elder Apache scout, two hawks, who had worked shoulder to shoulder with Sarah during her final missions. Though bound, his eyes were fierce, his dignity unbroken. Kaela's voice cracked. He's rounding up everyone connected to Mama's work. Not just to scare folks. He's building a stage, one he plans to set on fire. Vayak reappeared once more, this time with fire in his step. Just came from the mine. They've set up a whole display, maps, field logs, battlefield sketches, like a damn museum of lies. Roan's voice was steel. Then we'll give 'em one truth they can't whitewash, one message they'll never scrub out. Every detail was handpicked to sell his version of the truth. Roan Vexley's fingers brushed instinctively against the hidden letter from Isolde Marin, tucked safely in his coat. This ain't just a takeover, he muttered, eyes narrowed. Drayven's putting on a show, turning the commission meeting into a damn theater, meant to justify everything that follows. More wagons rolled into Salvation Creek, these ones hauling printing presses and boxes of photographic equipment. Silas Drayven wasn't just seizing power. He was making sure history remembered it his way. There's more, Vayak said, voice lower than usual and laced with tension. They found your mama's old field journal, the one from Petersburg. Drayven's men are tampering with it, adding entries, changing dates. The word struck Roan like a punch to the ribs. That journal had vanished during those final, tragic days, when complications from Kaela's birth had taken Isolde's life. Now it was being twisted into a weapon, used to bury everything she'd fought for. Kaela caught the flicker of pain in her father's eyes, quickly buried, but deep as ever. We can't let them do this, she said firmly. Mama's work saved lives. She uncovered corruption that reached all the way to D.C. It's worse than that, Elizabeth Rusk cut in. James, Judge Orlin Rusk, told me something before they hauled him off. Isolde wasn't just chasing old war secrets. She found patterns, connections too now. Men lining themselves up to control whole stretches of land once the railroads pushed west. Roan's jaw tightened, the old soldier in him stirring. That's why Drayven moved when he did. He couldn't afford to wait. This commission ain't about water rights, he added grimly. It's about laying down roots before the rest of us catch on to what he's really doing. Just then, scattered gunshots cracked across town, short, spaced out. Not gunfire meant to kill, but signals relayed from rooftop to alley. Drayven's men were shifting their posts, but Roan noticed something else. They were sloppy. They're rushing, he murmured, breaking formation. He's scared. Vayak nodded. They're watching the wrong paths, expecting you to hit like Petersburg. Straightforward tactics, military mind games. Kaela drew in a breath. He thinks he knows what you'll do. But he's forgotten the one thing that always mattered most. Roan said softly, his voice haunted by memories of Isolde. Your mother's greatest strength wasn't force. It was truth. The kind you can't ignore once you've seen it. Hoofbeats approached fast, dozens of riders, but these weren't Drayven's men. They were members of the Dust-Hold Pact, ranchers, farmers, men and women of the land. They brought word of troop movements, increased patrols, a tightening grip spreading far beyond Salvation Creek. Roan listened, his gaze sharpened. Drayven's plan stretched further than one town. The Railroad Commission was just the start. If this succeeded, it'd be a model for every territory across the frontier. But as Roan rallied the townsfolk, plotting, preparing, he saw something forming that Drayven hadn't counted on. A resistance, not born of fear, but of conviction. A town standing shoulder to shoulder, not just for land or law, but for truth itself. As noon crept closer and the fateful meeting loomed, Roan Vexley stood ready, not just to honor the woman he'd loved, but to defend the ideals she had died for. Drayven thought he was facing a tactician, a ghost from Petersburg, a relic he could outwit. But what he truly summoned was something far more dangerous. A truth so raw, so real, that no force on earth could bury it beneath lies. The ghost of Petersburg wasn't just a man, it was a reckoning. and it was coming. The commission meeting was scheduled for high noon, but Drayven's performance had begun long before that. As the sun arched overhead, Salvation Creek transformed into a stage for deception. Men in uniform moved with cold precision, flanking the commissioners as they were escorted into the old mining office. Now Drayven's Hall of Power. Each official was surrounded by armed guards. Not for protection, but containment. It was clear this wasn't a meeting. It was a production. From the shadowed edge of the mercantile, Roan and Kaela watched the wagons roll in, carrying not just documents, but crates of gear for photographers. Cameras were carefully positioned to capture moments. Not as they happened, but as Drayven wanted them seen. "Look how they're framing it," Kaela whispered. "It's not just about recording. They're choosing the angles, controlling the story." Roan's nod was tight. Every piece, staged, from the prisoners being marched through town to the armed guards on every corner. This ain't a seizure of power, it's a rewriting of the truth. Vayak appeared again, breath short, eyes urgent. "They've brought in more prisoners, not just Orlin Rusk and the Hawks. They've got Peterson from the land office, Matthews from the bank. Everyone who's touched official records in the past 10 years. Roan's gaze darkened. He's not just locking down the present. He's erasing the past, lifting his spyglass. Roan scanned the crowd, gathering in front of the hall. He saw the way Drayven's men arranged the townsfolk, placing influential voices at the front, herding the rest to the back. Every seat was chosen, every angle calculated. This wasn't just a land grab. It was a war for the truth. From where they crouched, hidden near the rear of the mercantile, Roan Vexley pointed subtly toward a group of finely dressed men being ushered into prime viewing spots. "Eastern financiers," she whispered. "Iron Crest reps. Drayven wants to make sure they see exactly what he wants them to see." But Roan Vexley's eyes were fixed elsewhere, on the undercurrent of movement within the townsfolk. It wasn't all going according to Drayven's script. Scattered among the crowd, Harlan Mearce's telegraph crew had positioned themselves with uncanny precision, relaying silent cues. Elizabeth Rusk, with her deep ties to old frontier families, had sent word through back channels. Allies were awakening. "Your mother would be proud," Roan murmured to Kaela, his voice caught between pain and pride. She always believed the best way to fight corruption was to help people see it for themselves. Their moment of quiet was shattered by the thunder of hooves and the gleam of polished brass. Silas Drayven rode in like an emperor claiming his crown, flanked by mounted guards and followed by a wagon laden with heavy strongboxes. A perfect performance timed to the arrival of the press. "Showtime," Vayak muttered, watching the military-like procession with wary eyes. Roan's hand instinctively found the letter from Isolde Marin, hidden against his chest. As Drayven dismounted, uniform immaculate, boots gleaming, posture regal, the man looked every bit the conqueror, though no official authority backed him now. "Citizens of Salvation Creek," Drayven's voice rang out with trained authority, silencing the murmurs of the crowd. "Today marks a historic turning point for this territory. The Railroad Commission's review of water rights isn't merely legal housekeeping, it's a transformation. From frontier chaos to civilized order." Kaela's gaze sharpened. She noticed how Drayven's men weren't just holding rifles, they were controlling narrative, isolating dissenters, silencing whisperers. Every movement, every posture was part of the spectacle. Drayven shifted tone, voice lowering into solemn gravity. "Before we proceed, certain matters must be addressed. Matters of corruption, subversion, and threats to the stability of our expanding nation." At his signal, men flung open the wagon. From within, strongboxes were hauled out, their contents revealed with deliberate showmanship. Papers, photographs, sealed evidence packets, presented to overwhelm. 10 years ago, Drayven continued, this land was infiltrated by hostile elements. Under cover of war, they built networks designed to sabotage progress. These networks still persist. Roan felt the stir in the crowd, whispers turning into realization. Folks began linking Drayven's words to the strange disappearances, the economic chokeholds, the sudden arrests. We've uncovered proof, Drayven declared, gesturing to the display. Individuals who used their wartime positions to embed themselves within our infrastructure, threatening the rightful expansion of the Iron Crest Company and its affiliates. His men began passing out broadsheets, printed in advance, pre-spun summaries of supposed treachery. But Kaela saw something else in motion. He's getting it wrong, she whispered to her father. The dates, the names. He's using forgeries. He doesn't understand the real story. Roan gave the slightest nod. Your mother knew, he said, eyes steady. She didn't just collect evidence. She made sure it couldn't be twisted. Drayven built toward his grand accusation. Among these conspirators, he said with grave finality, was a woman many once revered. Isolde Marin, hailed as a Union intelligence asset, was, in truth, a mastermind behind networks of manipulation that still endanger this territory's future. The crowd inhaled sharply, but Roan caught something Drayven had missed. The subtle looks passed between townsfolk, the discreet passing of handwritten notes, the silent resistance forming beneath the pageantry. Another strong box was opened on cue. We recovered her personal journal, Drayven announced, and within it, we found the blueprint of her deception. Roan's fingers twitched toward his concealed Colt, but Kaela's hand caught his wrist. Wait, she said, eyes scanning the crowd. Look. Notes moved hand to hand. Quiet conversations flowed behind polite smiles. Elizabeth Rusk's influence was more powerful than rifles. Her network was flooding the square with truth before Drayven could flood it with fear. Drayven held up the altered journal, its pages manipulated to frame Isolde as a traitor. This, he proclaimed, proves her role in establishing shadow authorities, threatening legitimate development for personal gain. But something was shifting. The crowd wasn't reacting the way he'd hoped. Instead of submission, there was a murmur of doubt, a rustle of skepticism. Trust was fraying, not toward Isolde's memory, but toward him. Roan Vexley allowed himself a small smile. Isolde hadn't just uncovered the truth. She'd planted it, in hearts, in minds, in the hands of people who understood its value. Now, as Drayven tried to bury her legacy beneath spectacle and slander, he was learning a hard truth of his own. You can silence a voice, but you can't silence a truth once it's taken root. Silas Drayven pressed forward with his booming rhetoric. The Iron Crest Company and this commission must weigh these revelations carefully, he declared. The security of our territory relies on stamping out these roots of corruption and placing rightful control in the hands of those fit to lead. But before he could continue, a disturbance stirred at the far edge of the crowd. From the mass of onlookers emerged a figure no one expected. It was Two Hawks, the weathered Apache scout, somehow freed from his bindings. But instead of fleeing, he stood still, shoulders squared, and raised his voice so it cut through the murmuring crowd like a hawk's cry through canyon wind. I knew Isolde Marin, he said, his voice strong despite his years. Knew her spirit, knew her truth. He turned his gaze toward the stack of evidence Drayven had paraded around. What's in that journal? He said, lifting his chin. It lies with a forked tongue. Drayven's men shifted, clearly waiting on a signal to move in. But they didn't. Something in the air had changed. The crowd, almost instinctively, had parted just enough around the old warrior, forming a protective ring of witnesses. Any attempt to seize him now would be seen for what it was. Violence, plain and public. Roan Vexley watched intently, jaw clenched. The Major's grand design was starting to come apart at the seams. Drayven had severely underestimated what a lifetime of earned trust could do. He'd forgotten that in these lands, respect was a weapon more dangerous than a rifle. The tension rose like a coiled storm, but not in the way Drayven had planned. His grand spectacle, designed to bend the town to his narrative, was being subverted before his eyes. And not by rebellion, but by something far quieter and far more powerful. Reckoning. Because justice in Salvation Creek didn't ride in with a badge or a battalion. It grew from memory, from bonds forged through hardship and truth passed from hand to hand like sacred scripture. And now, the legend of the Ghost of Petersburg, Isolde Marin's legend, was about to show that some wars aren't won with bullets or law books, but with the patient work of the soul. Drayven had come armed with polished uniforms and legal claims. But the real fight was never in the documents. It was in the people who remembered. And they remembered her. The Major's face tightened as Two Hawks' words echoed through the square. He raised a hand, sharp, commanding, about to bark the order to reassert control. But then, from the far side of the gathering, another voice rang out. Clear, confident, defiant. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, more legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe, leave your thoughts, and travel with us once again. Thank you, and God bless. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. The stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice, imagery, and structure. But every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies and do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audiovisual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot. Thank you for supporting artistic storytelling.